What's this wife's journey to the next world plan? I found it while cleaning Michael's room. It detailed exactly how he planned to stop me breathing. On top of that, it was full of complaints and resentments he had against me. Michael is about to retire. I thought we'd spend our retired life happily together. But it turns out he was thinking the exact opposite. This is awful. This is too much. A flame of anger ignited within me, and I decided to strike back at him. I am Arya Slattery, 56 years old. Our children are grown, and Michael and I live in a house in a part of Los Angeles. Michael is 3 years older than me and works at a bank. He earns a good salary, and I was able to dedicate myself to household chores and raising our children. However, his job was demanding, and he was somewhat of a tyrant at home. It was back when our children were just born, and I was struggling as a new mom. Can you take out the trash since you're going out anyway? I'm just feeding the baby right now.
No. I don't want to get my suit dirty, do I?
Oh, okay then. Have a good day. Michael never helped with even the smallest things. Of course, I understood that his job wore him out and he wanted to relax at home. But since we lived under the same roof, I wished he would cooperate a little. I felt abandoned by him and it was incredibly lonely. It's like I'm a maid around here. So, I sat down with him several times, trying to express how I felt.
Michael, raising a child for the first time is hard. I need your support.
What are you whining about?
It's just childcare and housework.
But if you have complaints, get a job and then talk. Then you'll understand how I feel. Despite how busy I was, Michael continued to do as he pleased. Eventually, our conversations dwindled, and I felt a huge rift had grown between us.
I can't let this go on. I need to change my approach.
It seemed like nothing I said got through to him, so I started to think hard about what I could do. Being naturally competitive, I couldn't just stay quiet after being spoken to so harshly. When our child started elementary school, I began working part-time at a major cafe chain.
How about that? I got a job, just like you said. So please, at least take out the trash.
Okay. I got it. Although we still didn't talk much, Michael started to acknowledge me a bit. Since then, if I asked him to carry dirty dishes to the sink or wipe the table, he would help, albeit reluctantly. Despite my feelings, I managed to continue our marriage life casually. As we overcame these challenges, time flew by quickly.
Michael and I are both in our late 50s now.
Michael turned 59 and is quite white-haired and has grown a bit of a belly, both in good and bad ways, since we first got married. One thing that hasn't changed is his unfamiliarity with electronic devices. Since we met, Michael has been complaining, I can't express myself well on a computer, especially my feelings. Despite the shift towards paperless operations and information management at his company, which led to hardly using paper notebooks anymore, Michael still struggled to remember how to use computers. He could type, but for other detailed tasks, he had to rely on younger colleagues. As his retirement neared, I was secretly thrilled.
Just a little longer. One more push.
We had avoided divorce, but our relationship had never been truly satisfying. But I hoped that once Michael left his job, he'd have more time for us. And I had quietly started planning our second life.
I wonder how Michael will react when he finds out.
I imagined us running a cafe together. In fact, when we first met, we dreamed of running a coffee shop together. Maybe back then, Michael mentioned it casually without much thought. That's probably why he chose to work at a bank. But I never forgot that dream and carried it with me to this age. That's also why I chose to work part-time at a major cafe chain, somewhat related to this dream.
I've saved up quite a bit, it should help with the startup funds.
To make the cafe dream a reality, I secretly saved money from my part-time job without telling Michael. When he settled down after retiring, I planned to reveal the existence of the bank account along with the cafe business plan. Until then, I kept the money hidden in a makeup box that Michael never used. However, I couldn't have imagined what was coming next. Was it about 6 months until his retirement? I had started to question his behavior.
Welcome home. I'll get dinner ready right away.
I ate out. No need. Around this time, Michael began to isolate himself in his room as soon as he got home from work. Although we always shared the bedroom, suddenly he said, "I'm gonna sleep alone," and moved his bed to his study. He also started leaving the house without telling me where he was going and would return the next day. To top it off, there were signs that he had withdrawn large sums of money, thousands of dollars at a time, from the bank account on 3 occasions. I couldn't stay silent anymore and confronted him as he was about to go out.
What are you using all this money for? Oh, that.
It seemed like he found it tedious to talk to me, making a face as if to say so.
I'm retiring soon, and I've had many dinners with people I owe thanks to. Isn't that too much money, though? I can't show up empty-handed after they've set everything up for me.
According to Michael, this was a custom at his workplace. He had seen former bosses give gifts to juniors when they left the company.
Oh, I see.
I've been with Michael for many years but had never heard such a thing. Nor had I ever heard of him receiving anything from retirees before. So, I wasn't completely convinced and felt I needed more detailed information.
What's the budget per person for these gifts you're giving?
It's a big milestone in your career, so I'm not planning to skimp on the money. However, as I manage our finances, I think it's something I should know. But when I asked, Michael immediately frowned.
It's none of your business.
He slammed the table, suddenly shouted, and stormed out. Maybe I touched a nerve. He knows the ins and outs of his company best, so maybe he felt like I was second-guessing him from the sidelines, which upset him. So, I decided not to bring it up anymore. But looking back, maybe I should have pressed him more at that time. Since then, the rift between us deepened, and Michael hardly even greeted me. However, after that, he didn't withdraw money from the bank on his own anymore. I figured the gifts for his juniors must have been finished by then. One day, Michael said he was going on a business trip to the Chicago branch for a week. Yet, he seemed unusually happy, even humming and smiling. Is it really for work? Usually, when he mentioned business trips, they involved back-to-back meetings, and he'd have a gloomy face before leaving. But this time, his mood was definitely more like he was off to have fun, which filled my head with question marks. So, I cautiously asked why he was in such a good mood. But then I suddenly remembered upsetting him with my question about the money for the gifts. Maybe if I ask straight out, he'll get angry again. Not wanting to worsen our relationship, I was careful with my words.
Business in Chicago sounds tough. But you seem pretty relaxed, so maybe your schedule isn't packed?
I ended up speaking very indirectly, but he stopped what he was doing and turned to me.
Even though it's a business trip, it's just internal training, so it's not that tough. That's good to hear. I thought you were gonna be swamped with work like usual. And, it's actually a kind of early retirement celebration for me since this will likely be the last time I see my colleagues at the Chicago branch. I'm looking forward to it.
Michael, showing a broad smile I seldom see, went back to packing his bags.
There was nothing to be suspicious about after all. I worried for nothing.
Without dwelling on unnecessary thoughts, I cheerfully saw Michael off on his trip. But then, suddenly, something happened. The day Michael left for his trip, I had a day off from my part-time job, and I was at home alone, sipping tea and enjoying some quiet time.
Michael is finally nearing his retirement.
Then, reflecting on everything that had happened, I was filled with a deep sense of emotion. Our marriage was never perfect, but Michael has worked hard for me and our children, who are already independent. Thinking about this, my eyes suddenly welled up with tears.
All right. Time to give Michael's study a thorough cleaning as a token of my appreciation.
I had always vacuumed his room. But his study was cluttered with desks and dressers, and I hadn't been able to clean every nook and cranny. Eager to get started, I rolled up my sleeves and decided to give his room a deep clean, gratitude in mind. The hardest spot was under the bed. It seemed cluttered as the vacuum nozzle didn't slide smoothly under it. So, I decided to remove everything from the floor before vacuuming up the dust.
Oh, what a rare find this is.
Under the bed, I pulled out a college notebook from a container. Michael hardly ever used such things for work, preferring to type everything on his computer. It looked quite worn.
Why does he have this?
I didn't understand why Michael was still using a notebook. However, considering it might contain sensitive company information that should not be seen by others, I decided not to look inside and just left it on the desk. But then, I accidentally dropped the notebook on the floor, and it fell open. As I hurried to pick it up and put it back, an unexpected phrase caught my eye.
Plan to murder the wife! What is this?
My hands trembled as I held the notebook. It detailed a plan to lure me into the shed and eliminate me from this world. I wanted to believe it was a mistake. But the pressure of the handwriting and the realistic details made it hard to dismiss as mere fantasy.
I can't believe he would use that place.
Our shed in the backyard was big enough for an adult to enter easily and could be locked with a padlock from the outside. It was old and a bit run down, barely used lately, and not locked. The fact that it could be locked from the outside must have seemed convenient for trapping someone inside. The notebook even mentioned that if asked by the police why it was locked, the plan was to claim unawareness of anyone being inside. Then, supposedly, if someone accidentally set the shed on fire, he could claim it was an unfortunate accident.
Unbelievable. Why do I have to end up in the next world?
Anger and sorrow mixed together as I continued to read the notebook. It appeared to contain entries similar to a diary that Michael had written in haste. Based on the dates, he had started using this notebook about 6 months ago.
Around the same time Michael started staying in his room more and going out unexpectedly.
Unable to express himself otherwise, he likely vented his frustrations here. He wrote pages of grievances against me and noted how desperately he didn't want to give me his pension. Several pages even had a large X over my name, Arya. And then I remembered him saying he couldn't express himself well on the computer, especially his emotions.
So that's why he used the notebook.
This was a direct look into Michael's mind. Realizing how much he despised me was a profound shock. I was terrified to turn the page. But I told myself, don't run away, and chose to face the unknown side of my husband. It turned out, Michael was aware of the secret bank account I had set up for the cafe. Given how much he didn't want to give me his pension, he would have liked to withdraw the money right away. But it seems Michael stopped short.
That's cunning of him.
Fearing that leaving a trail would ruin his plans, he deliberately chose not to touch the hidden money.
Once Arya's gone, I'll get that money anyway. It's like hitting the jackpot? How dare he?
It was clear as day that Michael no longer cared about me at all. To top it off, the diary stated, I want to live alone with Amelia, and as long as I have Amelia, I don't need anything else.
Does he only have thoughts of being with Amelia?
From the text, it was undeniable that Amelia was his affair partner. It seems like he's been doing quite well with a much younger woman behind my back. I murmured as I unwittingly traced the wrinkles on my face in the mirror. And then it clicked, Michael's staying in his room more often and going out frequently must have been related to Amelia. Just the thought of living with such a man made me feel incredibly sick.
So, it's because of his mistress that he's planning to kill me.
To my dismay, even the exact date for carrying out the plan was set. Apparently, that date was very important to both Michael and his mistress. Checking the calendar, X day was only a week away.
While I was busy planning for our cafe, Michael was plotting to send me to the next world. I can't forgive this.
The sorrow from his betrayal was fleeting. The anger inside me grew far stronger, as if flames were furiously burning throughout my body. Gradually, a desire for revenge on Michael began to grow, and I naturally started snooping around his room for anything that could be useful. Then, I discovered a cardboard box labeled Memories with Amelia tucked away in the closet.
Let's see, what's inside this? Oh. What is this?
I didn't understand what I saw immediately, but since it was labeled Memories, it must have been something significant to them. Thus, I decided to use the contents of the box to plot my counterattack against my husband. First, I checked on Michael's activities at work. I had a hunch that more slip-ups might surface. Indeed, my suspicions were confirmed. According to a coworker, about 6 months ago, Michael had significantly increased his unauthorized absences under the pretense of my needing care.
What? This is nonsense. Was he taking time off to date his mistress?
My anger towards my husband intensified, and I gripped the phone harder. Then, another shocking new fact was disclosed, and before I could confront him with his lies, I hung up the phone.
This is the worst kind of human being.
Unaware that I had discovered his schemes, Michael was probably having fun on his business trip. I was overtaken by the urge to grab him by the scruff of his neck and confront him immediately. However, as things were still insufficiently clear at this point, I restrained my anger and instead contacted a professional to undertake renovations at our house. The contractor was puzzled, asking, "Is there really a point in doing this?" But I was very satisfied with the results. And finally, I set up several items in preparation. I quietly waited for X day. A week later, the execution day written in the plan arrived. As darkness fell, Michael returned from his business trip and, instead of heading straight to his room as usual, he started pacing around the living room.
Something is suspicious. I knew it.
Watching him, I was convinced he was about to act on his plans against me. According to the plan, he was supposed to lure me to the shed. If that's his intent, I'll turn the tables on him. I silently waited for his move. Yet, Michael, the very person who was supposed to set the trap, seemed oddly tense and was pulling awkward faces, hesitating to speak to me. "Come on. What are you doing?" Tired of waiting, I decided to create an opportunity myself.
"Welcome home. Do you need something from me?"
I thought this would naturally lead him to lure me to the shed. Yet, Michael let me down.
I'm home. Do I need something? Oh, what was it?"
I couldn't tell if he was excited or just lacked courage, but Michael's voice was shaky, and we could hardly have a conversation.
"Come on. Remember." "Amelia, no. I had something to ask Arya."
Perhaps he had been fantasizing too much about a sweet future with Amelia, accidentally calling me Amelia. This almost made me burst out laughing, but his face was so serious that it only made the situation funnier.
"Something about me going somewhere to fetch something." The shed. There's some of my stuff in the shed, could you get it for me?" "Understood. I'll wait here. Please take care of it."
Finally moving to the next step, I had an idea. I've made him work this hard, maybe I should give him a little trouble. After making sure Michael was following me, I suddenly turned around sharply. Naturally, he tried to hide from me and quickly ducked behind something. But perhaps because it was dark outside, he bumped into something, making a tremendously loud noise.
"Oh? What was that noise?"
I deliberately raised my voice loud enough for him to hear. His response, obviously not wanting to be found, was rather childish.
"Meow, meow."
Michael's imitation of a cat was so poor, I thought even a kindergarten child could do better. However, lingering here would be pointless, so I decided to let it slide. Pretending I hadn't noticed anything, I finally made it to the shed. With a flashlight in hand, I opened the door and entered the cluttered space. Then suddenly, I heard a loud bang from behind and turned to see the door had been closed. Was it locked from the outside? I tried to open it, but the door wouldn't budge.
"Someone open up!"
Despite pounding on the shed door and shouting, there was no response from outside. Then, I smelled a sharp scent of oil, and soon, white smoke began to fill the area.
"This is dangerous!"
The shed wasn't made of wood, but it was so old that I expected it could catch fire quickly. If I couldn't escape, I would end up exactly as Michael had planned, in the next world. Michael, grinning as he watched the shed begin to burn, froze the next moment.
"Why do you look so happy?" "Wait! You're supposed to be inside there!"
Michael blinked rapidly as he pointed to the shed engulfed in flames.
"I saw through your plan from the start."
Knowing his plans, I had hired a contractor to build a secret exit behind the shed. I had hidden it with stuff until today so it wouldn't be discovered. Of course, the contractor thought it was an unusual request and spent the whole time shaking his head.
You tricked me. I don't want to hear that from you. And I know about the affair you're having. What?
Perhaps realizing he was in trouble, Michael stepped back a bit.
I found those memories with another woman. Did you look inside?
It must have hit a nerve. His expression suddenly became severe.
Of course. Oh. That's right. I moved it to the shed. I wonder what happened to it now. What?
Suddenly, Michael went pale and frantically started to extinguish the fire with a fire extinguisher. But contrary to his hopes, it was already too late, and everything was burnt to a crisp.
Why would you do something so awful?
Furious, Michael even had tears in his eyes.
I just moved it because it was in the way when I was cleaning the room. You're the one who set it on fire. To think my precious cardboard box was in there. It's the end of the world.
Michael broke down crying, devastated that his memories with his affair had burned.
What's so important about that doll? I don't understand.
Inside the box labeled Memories with Amelia was a female character figure with pink hair down to her waist, wearing a short skirt. Furthermore, the box contained several dolls of girls in different outfits, all neatly arranged. So when I first saw this figure, I understood it must have been very important to him. Even if this doll was a shared hobby between Michael and his affair, the diary stated, as long as I have Amelia, I don't need anything else. Would losing a figure really make him this upset?
Michael, you're really overreacting. Shut up. My girlfriend just got burned to a crisp. Oh no. Amelia. Wait, the doll is Amelia?
When I asked, Michael nodded deeply without saying a word. At the same time, I realized that Amelia, whom I thought was his affair partner, was actually the name of the female figure in the cardboard box.
You withdrew a large sum of money from the bank to buy this? What an awful way to say it. It's all priceless. I'd spend any amount on it. So all that about giving gifts to juniors was a lie?
Michael let out a groan, his face momentarily awkward, but then he flushed red with anger.
It's my money. I can spend it however I want. Back off. That's my line. So you were trying to kill me over a doll? Of course. You're just going to age, but Amelia will always be 19.
I was left speechless, my mouth hanging open in shock. I had never imagined that my husband could be so childish. He was screaming, unloading information about the figure even though I had no interest in it. According to him, her full name is Amelia Swan, an idol who secretly dreams of a happy married life, and her preferred type is a mature, older man.
Now you see. I'm the ideal partner for her. You're almost 60, Michael. And she's not a real person. I can't understand what you're thinking. What? What are you even talking about? Amelia always gives me a smile. She's the perfect woman.
I was about to retort, it's a doll, it's supposed to have the same expression. But I realized arguing with Michael in his current state would only lead to more ranting about Amelia and decided it was better not to say anything unnecessary. But really, this must be what they mean by an unbelievable truth. Thinking back, Michael had started spending more time in his room. Until today, I thought he was secretly calling a mistress. And I was convinced he wanted all his pension for himself to lavish on a woman, which is why he was trying to send me to the next world. But in reality, he was just adoring his figures in his study. He wanted the retirement money for buying merchandise.
It's no joke. What do you think my life is worth?
I confronted Michael, but he was too distraught to respond, crying over his charred collection.
All that skipping work just to gather them.
I had thought his unexplained absences were for secret meetings with a mistress, but it was all for his doll, Amelia.
I was planning to make today our anniversary.
Apparently, today was the figure's birthday, an important day for both Amelia and Michael. He had planned to remove the nuisance that was me to create a world just for the two of them. At this point, all I could do was be dumbfounded. I decided to settle things once and for all.
Speaking of retirement funds,
There's something you should know. Suddenly Michael turned to listen. What?
You've been telling everyone I need expensive medical treatment to garner sympathy and have been collecting money from colleagues?
This was a fact I discovered when I called his workplace to check on his behavior.
I haven't even had a cold in decades. Well, that. But it turns out you were actually going out to buy figures. Damn!
Michael covered his mouth, but it was too late.
If I tell your company everything, you could get fired, and there goes your pension. That would be terrible. Terrible.
He then started pacing the garden in evident distress. However, Michael had a particular reason to be so agitated.
It's understandable you feel this way, given all the debt you've accumulated.
I pulled out a loan agreement sent from a consumer finance company addressed to Michael. The amount written on it was a staggering $160,000. I had found the document in his study's trash can while I was searching through his things.
Without your pension, repaying the debt will be difficult, won't it? I was counting on that, and now my calculations are all messed up. With retirement just half a year away, life might get tough without your salary from the company.
As a banker, Michael had a decent income. Even if he lost his job now, we had savings, so we wouldn't be destitute right away. Yet, as I stirred up his fears, he showed considerable distress and began to sweat profusely from his forehead. From his reaction, I sensed that he must have other debts as well.
Damn it! Now that it has come to this, I'll blame you for setting the fire to the shed and demand a hefty compensation. That's a lie, and I'll outright reject it. Me, a bank man, and you, just a part-time housewife. No one's going to take your side.
Michael tried to silence me, his eyes wide and furious. But it was he who suddenly lost his words.
Then, let's check the security camera footage. What? Security cameras? Where are they?
Over there and there.
And I've installed some here too.
After making the new entrance to the shed, I had installed cameras as a final touch. I placed many cameras at different angles to capture his actions. All equipped with night vision.
Now you can't talk your way out of this. I'm sorry. I was wrong.
Finally, in a feeble voice, he clung to me.
It's too late for apologies. This is goodbye between us. What do you mean by that? You can't be serious. I got so angry I moved out on the spot. You only go between your room and the living room, so you didn't notice, did you?
Shocked, Michael froze, unable to respond.
That's not all. I've consulted with a lawyer about this incident and am going to demand compensation and file for divorce. Be prepared.
Reflecting on Michael's betrayal, my voice was the strongest it had been all day. Meanwhile, Michael kept apologizing over and over. Perhaps a neighbor had called the authorities. From afar, I could hear the sirens of police cars and fire engines approaching.
Well. Looks like your ride has arrived. What? Are they coming this way? Then I guess this is it for me. Since you tried to kill me by setting the fire, you'll be thrown in jail for sure. No way! Come on, just make something up and help me get away.
Finally, Michael broke down sobbing.
I can't just let you go after you tried to end my life. Please, somehow. With the camera and notebook evidence, I'm going to hand you over to the police, so just give up. No, this can't be.
Unable to stand, Michael collapsed in tears. Just then, the police arrived and took him away. As a witness, I also went to the police station and disclosed everything. After the interrogation, Michael was incarcerated for arson. I hired a lawyer, and it was arranged for Michael to pay me $40,000 in compensation. He was also fired from his job and lost his pension. Furthermore, it turned out he had debts totaling about $300,000 from various sources. Even if Michael gets out of jail, he will be hounded by debt collectors and face continuous hardships. I sold the house and used the money along with my savings to open a cafe with living quarters. The cafe is doing well, and I am busy every day. I've finally realized my long-held dream and am having the best time of my life.
I hate to break it to you, but my girlfriend who's 20 years younger is pregnant. I prefer younger girls, so I'm getting a divorce. Cool with you? Alright, divorce if you want, but take good care of our son. Huh? You should take the boy with you. Haven't you spoiled him enough? No, I can't. Because he is.
I closed my mouth right there. If this conversation was to stay between us, there wouldn't be any problem. But this voice, Ken must have heard it from his place in the room. What would he think if he heard this? That was my only concern. Still, I must retort, or else this man will not understand the gravity of the situation. Destroying our happiness and only thinking about his own? That's too selfish. I won't stand for it. Just as our happiness was taken away, I want to take his away too. Driven by such feelings, I decided to confront Ted with a shocking truth. My name is Mila Davis, I am 41 years old. I live with my husband Ted and our high school junior son, Ken. I married Ted 13 years ago when I was 28. Back then, I was an insurance saleswoman. I used to visit various companies and sell insurance. That's when I met Ted. Ted was working at a local import-export business, and he had just divorced his wife.
My wife cheated on me and left me. Now I'm living with my 5-year-old son, just the two of us, and it's pretty lonely.
He said, looking somewhat sorrowful. Every time I visited Ted's company for work, I started talking to him. Eventually, Ted asked me, would you like to go out together? But we never went out, just the two of us. Because Ted always brought his son Ken along.
He can't stay at home alone, right? I'd really love for you to be my son's new mom, but I guess you wouldn't want to marry a man with a child?
Seeing him like that, I thought he truly cherishes his child. If he could care for a child like that, then surely he'd care for his family. So, I decided to marry Ted. But that was all a performance to marry me. In fact, as soon as we got married, Ted changed. I quit my job as soon as we got married and became a housewife. Housework and childcare became my job. That wasn't a problem, but Ted started neglecting Ken. Before our marriage, he even brought Ken along on our dates. But after our marriage, he didn't even look at Ken. Not just on weekdays, but even on weekends, Ted never talked to Ken. He never took Ken out somewhere, never played with him, nothing. Even after Ken started elementary school, Ted's attitude didn't change one bit. I went to all the school events alone, and he totally ignored all events that parents should join and enjoy together.
You could at least attend some of the school events with Ken.
When I said that, Ted made a grimace. After that, he sighed in annoyance and said, sorry, but I'm just tired from work.
But... Oh, be quiet. Taking care of our son is your job as his mother, right? Just do it properly.
And with that, he shouted and ended the conversation. What happened to the man I knew before we got married? I felt a twinge of regret. Then, one day, Ken had just come home from elementary school and was helping me prepare dinner. Suddenly, a message from Ted arrived on my phone. Wait. What? He's bringing his subordinates home from now? Apparently, he was going to bring several colleagues home. Ted had just been promoted to team leader. So he probably wanted to deepen his relationship with his new subordinates.
What should I do? We don't have any food stored.
They would surely end up drinking at our home. And if that's the case, we'll need some snacks. It's not even an hour's drive from the office to our home. After some thought, I decided to go to the nearby supermarket to buy some ingredients. When I got home, I started cooking in a hurry.
I'll help too. Oh, thank you. Then, could you please get the dishes ready?
We prepared as hard as we could, but there were limits. Ted arrived home when only about half of the preparations were done.
I'm home! Hey, I brought my colleagues!
Ted shouted at the entrance. I greeted them briefly and led them to the room. Then I served them beer and snacks. As I was thinking about preparing the next dish, Ted came into the kitchen and asked me,
Hey, what's happening with the food? I'm cooking right now. There are snacks, so it should be okay for now. What have you been doing? I told you in advance. If you could notify me a bit earlier. Stop complaining. You should have this ready. Do you want me to be embarrassed?
I was shouted at and was left speechless. Of course, there were countless things I wanted to rebut. But the sound in the kitchen could be heard in the living room. The guests must have felt uncomfortable too. Thinking so, I couldn't say anything in response. In the end, I just silently endured our guests. But once the guests had left, I had a big fight with Ted. I was angry at Ted for shouting at me just because of his own convenience. Then Ted puckered his lips and said in a childish manner, "Okay, fine. I'll have a party in some venues from now on. Happy now?" After that, Ted started to hang out more. His spending got wilder, and he would head out early on his days off. By then, Ken had become a 7th grade student, and it started costing money for things like after-school programs. That's when I talked to Ted about wanting to start a part-time job.
A part-time job? What, you want money for leisure? No, that's not it. It's for things like Ken's tuition for the after-school programs. Oh, I see. Do whatever you want.
Ted, maybe because he was drunk, gave a careless response. Even so, I got his word. And so, I started a part-time job. The job was as an insurance agent. I asked a former boss from the company I worked at before marriage to make me a part-time employee.
This should make things a little easier.
Even then, because Ted complained, I couldn't slack off on housework. The time I could work was limited, and I had to prepare dinner before Ted got home. I managed my time well and kept working. Then one day, I accidentally let work run late. I hurried home, but Ted had already returned. As soon as he saw me, Ted asked with a sullen face,
"Where have you been?"
"I was at my part-time job."
Part-time job? You weren't cheating on me, were you?
Ted stared at me intently.
There's no way that's true.
I denied it firmly. But Ted kept looking at me with suspicious eyes. Just as I was wondering what to do, Ted reached out for my smartphone.
Let me see. I'll check if there are any men's names. Stop it! Shut up!
Ted forcefully snatched my phone and began to check the contacts. And he quickly found my boss's name.
Hey! Who's this? It's a man's name, isn't it? That's my boss. He's your lover, ain't he? All right then.
Before I could react, Ted dialed my boss.
Stop it. You just keep quiet.
Thankfully, the misunderstanding was cleared up quickly. Of course, I apologized profusely to my boss. I urged Ted to do the same, but he simply looked away.
It's your fault for making it look like you're doing something wrong.
That's all he kept saying. Since then, things between us just went downhill. Even when Ken became a 9th grade, nothing changed. Is this really okay to keep this relationship? I would think that, but I couldn't come up with a way to mend our relationship. Before I knew it, Ken became senior in his high school, preparing for college. Lately, things between Ted and I had completely gone cold. We hardly ever argued at home anymore. At least it wouldn't affect Ken's studies.
Things can stay like this until Ken enters the college.
That's what I thought. Then, one day, I had to go near Ted's workplace for my job.
If things were good between us, I'd invite him to lunch.
As I muttered this, I spotted Ted's car across the intersection.
Wait, is that Ted with who?
As I squinted, I saw 2 people laughing and chatting. The word infidelity flashed in my mind. Accusing others of infidelity while doing it yourself? What a joke. I was too stunned to say anything. I secretly took a picture of them and went to a private detective to ask them to investigate Ted.
I probably know the answer already.
The thought crossed my mind. The idea of divorce was already set in my mind. But evidence is crucial in these matters. So, I waited for the results of the investigation. About a month later, the results arrived. They were damning. He really had the nerve. Just divorcing didn't seem enough anymore.
How should I get back at him?
On a certain day off, lost in my thoughts. Ted, who was supposed to be out, came home unexpectedly soon.
Rushing over to me, he exclaimed, "I'm sorry, but my girlfriend, who's 20 years younger, is pregnant." What?
I couldn't believe my ears. But there he was, a smirk on his face, declaring,
"So yeah, my girlfriend who's 20 years younger is pregnant. I prefer younger women, so I'm gonna divorce you. That's fine, right?"
Well, he certainly had the guts to confess his affair himself. However, I saw this as an opportunity. With this in mind, I decided to seize the moment.
"Go ahead and get married, but please take care of our son."
With a smile on my face, I said this, which seemed to catch Ted off guard.
"What? You should take our son with you. You've always been so fond of him." "I don't want to. Because that boy is..."
I carefully chose my words. Ken, who was studying in his room, should be able to hear me. What would he think if he heard this? That was my only concern. That being said, if I don't stand up to him now, he won't understand the gravity of the situation. It's far too convenient for him to destroy our happiness and go off and find his own. I won't let that happen. I want to snatch away his happiness just like ours was taken from us. Driven by these thoughts, I decided to confront Ted with a truth that would stun him.
"I hate to break it to you, but isn't Ken your son? He's not mine." "What are you talking about? We're married, right? If we're married, then our child is our child, right?"
Ted declared, looking smug. At that moment, I was at a loss for words. Is this guy an idiot? He's 4 years older than me, and he knows nothing. I was too stunned to say anything. Surprised at his lack of understanding, I exhaled deeply and hit Ted with the truth.
"Ken is your child with your ex-wife, right? So what? In other words, to me, Ken is your stepchild. To make a stepchild one's own, one must adopt them." "Huh? Adoption?"
Ted furrowed his brow. Generally speaking, stepchildren remain just that, stepchildren. To act as a real parent, the only way is to adopt them legally. Without doing that, you can't have parental rights and the child won't be legally recognized as yours. Of course, socially, they may be seen as your children. But there's no legal binding. A stepparent has no legal obligations, and a stepchild has no rights to the parent's inheritance.
"I didn't adopt Ken when I married you, Ted. That's why I can't take Ken with me." "Wait, hold on. So, does that mean I have to take care of Ken?" "That seems to be the case. Although I wouldn't say you'd be charged with parental negligence just for leaving him alone."
Still, Ken is a high school student. An age where parents are obligated to raise their children. In other words, it can be said that Ted can't just abandon him. While looking stunned, Ted pleads with me.
"Come on, that can't be right." "What can't?" "I have a baby on the way. I plan to live with my newborn and my soon-to-be wife, just the three of us. That was the condition for marrying Kay."
Oh, so the woman he cheated with is named Kay.
"So? That has nothing to do with me. It's got everything to do with you. This could all be resolved if you just take Ken. But I've told you, I can't, right? Just find a way. Please, don't ruin my happiness."
He was begging. Don't ruin his happiness? I'm shocked at his audacity. After shattering our happiness, he doesn't get to demand his own happiness. With clenched teeth, I tell Ted, no matter what you say, what can't be done can't be done. You should ask your girlfriend, Kay.
"You're truly heartless. Fine, you'll regret this."
Ted slammed the table and stood up. Then, as he picked up his cell phone, he walked out of the room. Following him with my gaze, I noticed him making a call in the hallway. That's why. Yeah, that's right. So. I could hear his voice. Eventually, Ted came back and said to me, "Just wait. I'm bringing Kay over."
"What? You're bringing her here?" "Of course, because you're refusing to budge, I have no other choice."
For some reason, Ted shouted angrily. It seemed like he didn't believe he was in the wrong. Well, we still have to discuss the division of property, and this might make things easier. With that thought, I quietly watched Ted leave. About an hour had passed since Ted left the house. He returned, bringing a woman with him. As I stole a glance at her, she greeted with a look of discontent.
Hi.
She didn't even attempt to meet my gaze. I can somewhat understand her feelings. Meeting the spouse of the person you're having an affair with, no matter how you think of it, cannot be a pleasant experience. Regardless, Kay turned out to be the woman who had been in Ted's car that day. I can't deny thinking, it's all because of this woman. But, thanks to this woman, I can bring Ted down to his lowest. With that thought, a smile naturally spilled onto my face. How should I start the conversation? While I was considering this, Kay spoke up first.
You're Mila, right? Don't you think your child is adorable? You've lived together for about 13 years, haven't you? Are you talking about Ken? If so, I do think he's adorable. I consider him as much my child as if he were my own. Then why are you abandoning him? You should take him with you.
I stared at Kay. Sweat was beginning to bead on her forehead. I knew it. She condemns me with her words, but she doesn't truly mean it. I recalled the results of the investigation into Ted's conduct. If the current situation described there about Kay is true, it makes sense why she would argue like this. So, I decided to shake them up.
I'd love to take him with me. But, no matter how adorable he is and no matter how much I love him, legally, only Ted is Ken's parent. I can't become Ken's parent. But, yes, there's also the option of not getting a divorce. And you need to raise your child by yourself.
Upon hearing this, Kay flinched. She then turned to Ted and said, I can't raise a baby on my own.
Don't worry. I'll take care of our child. Besides, I'm definitely getting a divorce and I want to be with you.
At that point, I interrupted.
What are you talking about? It hasn't been decided whether we're getting a divorce yet. Shut up. I'm definitely getting a divorce. So, you're taking Ken with you? We're gonna discuss that later. We're getting nowhere. Kay, what do you think?
I turned the conversation over to Kay. She made a pout and said, I can't raise someone else's child.
Even if it's the child of the man you love? Of course not. I love Ted, not some child of Ted and another woman. Oh, I see. But isn't your argument a bit strange? Why? You don't want to raise someone else's child. That's your personal opinion, and I won't blame you for it. But, you're okay with making Ted raise another person's child, right?
As soon as I said that, Kay's face turned suddenly pale. At the same time, Ted tilted his head.
What are you talking about? I'm talking about the baby, Kay's baby in her belly. This child is mine. I told you that before. Sure, you did say that. But it's odd. According to what I investigated, the father of Kay's child should be another man.
As soon as I broke the news, Ted turned to Kay. With her face pale, Kay looked down, and Ted stared at her. The whole scene was so ridiculous that I nearly burst into laughter. Then, Ted interrogated Kay.
Is what she said true? What? I mean, about the father of the child. Don't be stupid. The father of this child is you, Ted.
Kay banged on the table to argue back. But I calmly told her.
That's not true. I have proof, look.
Saying this, I laid out a single photo on the table. It was a picture I got as a result of a private investigation. The picture showed Kay and an unknown man talking in front of an obstetrician's office.
With a private investigation, they also check if you're cheating. According to that, you have a man you're seeing. The child in your belly, it's his, isn't it? That. I mean.
Kay started to stutter, unable to speak. Seeing her like this, Ted seemed to have understood everything. He collapsed in despair.
That's why you should divorce me and raise the child together. Well, Ted, you'll be raising someone else's child. But Kay, you're okay with that, right? No, no way. Don't forget about Ken, okay? Wait, let's get back together, Mila. If I break up with her, you won't divorce, right? What? You're saying whatever suits you. Sorry, but I was also planning to divorce. So, this comes at the right time. And I'll claim a hefty division of property.
Saying so, I slammed their cheating the evidence on the table. Spread out on the table were photos of the two of them cheating. Of course, there were also photos of Kay and the unknown man. Ted picked up one of the photos and shouted at Kay.
This lying woman. It's all ruined because of you. That's my line. You should have thought. I would prefer a younger man. I thought I could just get the money and break up if I have to take the child.
Suddenly, Ted and Kay started fighting amongst themselves. Fed up, I said, take your fight somewhere else, and kicked them out of the house. After that, I went to Ken's room. I gently knocked on the door, and Ken peeked out. I'm sorry. You heard the conversation, didn't you? Well, yeah. But that was all on my dad. It's not like it's your fault or anything. But I'm totally fine, really. I'll be a college student next year, and I'll make my dad pay for the move and then do whatever I want. Ken flashed a slight smile. He seemed more mature than I had thought. I was relieved to see my son's growth. However, his father, Ted, has not matured at all. No matter how many times I tried to contact him, he stopped answering my calls. Even after a few days had passed, the situation remained unchanged. The divorce negotiations wouldn't proceed like this. And he doesn't seem to be coming home either. So, troubled, I decided to go to Ted's company. But showing up suddenly might just be a nuisance. So, I contacted Ted's boss, Mr. Wilson, before heading to his company. When I arrived at the company, Mr. Wilson promptly attended to me. And he summoned Ted to his office. At the same time, he also called for Kay. With the two of them in front of me, I addressed Ted.
You know why I'm here, right? What's it? Because you won't cooperate with the divorce discussions. How long are you planning to ignore this?
As I spoke in a strong tone, Ted shrugged his shoulders. On the other hand, Kay had been quiet after she came here.
You look worried that your boyfriend will find out your relationship with Ted, Kay. Well, he probably already knows since you're here.
As I smirked, Kay looked downcast. Apparently, the man Kay truly loves also works in this company. So, it was only a matter of time before Kay's infidelity was exposed. Ted resisted until the very end. But after being admonished by Mr. Wilson, he finally agreed to cooperate with the divorce discussions.
Well, I'll be heading home now.
As I stood up to leave, Ted voiced his dissatisfaction.
Showing up at my workplace, you've got to be kidding. If this ruins my reputation, what are you gonna do? You're the one at fault here, not me. Besides, an affair won't get you fired.
In fact, you cannot be fired for having an affair. But if word spreads around the office, who knows what might happen? It could make his work more difficult and the office a more uncomfortable place. But that's not my problem. I just came to talk about the divorce. Whether Ted decides to quit his job or not has nothing to do with me. The same goes for Kay.
Well, do your best.
With that, I left Ted and Kay at the office. After that, I was able to get the division of property from Ted through my lawyer. However, according to the vice Mr. Wilson, there were some problems. It happened after I left his office. Word of their affair spread like wildfire throughout the company. Naturally, Kay's boyfriend also heard about it. The two of them had a big fight, and the man broke up with her on the spot. Infuriated by her breakup, Kay demanded that Ted pay her compensation for damages. She claimed Ted abused her mentally. Of course, Ted was not going to agree to that. Eventually, it all spiraled into a messy court battle. And because the affair had become public knowledge in the company and they were now in court, both of them ended up leaving the company. Ted tried to find another job, but it was difficult because of his age. It seems like he's now working part-time at a local shop. Kay, on the other hand, is apparently pregnant and has been holed up at her parents' house. Anyway, I think they can't hold their heads high until the court ruling is made. On the other hand, things have been going really well for me. My boss even suggested that I come back as a full-time employee. Thanks to that, I'm now working hard as a full-time employee. My relationship with Ken, who is studying hard and preparing for his college, is also going great. He even told me, I have a girlfriend and I want you to meet her. Even though I'm not your mother anymore, is it okay if it's me? When I asked that, Ken said, even though Ted's my dad, I respect you more as a parent. Right now, I'm busy supporting my son with his college preparation. My name is Mary. I just turned 35 this year. On a summer day filled with the sound of birdsong, I was called into the president's office.
Boss, what can I do for you?
The president, who is my mother, spoke curtly without turning her beautiful profile, seemingly bothered by the heat.
I've decided to hand the company over to your sister. You're dismissed as of today.
The summer sunshine was so blinding that I couldn't quite grasp the reality of what was being said.
Huh?
I guess my voice sounded pretty dumbfounded. My mother, now looking quite exasperated, turned her gaze towards me. Didn't you hear me? You're fired. We don't need ugliness around here. Be gone by the end of the month. With that, she turned her eyes to the documents on her desk, as if indicating our business was done. In the president's office, where only the sound of birds echoed, I was mulling over her words when she reprimanded me. Are you still here? Get back to your work immediately. I stepped back mechanically like a puppet, said, excuse me, and left the office, closing the door behind me. Our company is just a small 2-story building, a demolition business with about 10 employees. The business is family-run, the president being my mother, with my aunt and her husband as the executive directors, and my mom's cousins as the managing directors. But it was clear that my mother had most of the power. Originally, after high school, I worked at an accounting firm. However, when I was 25, my mother told me they didn't have an accountant and asked, are you going to abandon your family in trouble? It's you who will be troubled in the end. She pretty much forced me to join our company. Furthermore, the duties assigned to me were not limited to accounting. My mother shoved all the paperwork and miscellaneous tasks onto me. Whenever there was a shortage of hands, I was even sent out for sales. In short, I was the company's jack of all trades. Still, to not be a burden on others, I worked hard from morning till night, and somehow managed to get the work done over the past 10 years. On the other hand, the sister who was to take over the company, Lucy, was 3 years younger than me at 32 and had only been with the company for 2 years. Before joining us, Lucy had been hopping from one job to another, complaining that they weren't a good fit for her. Once she turned 30, her employment conditions started to deteriorate, and she quit job hunting, spending her days lounging around at home. And then, my mother said, Lucy should get a job that suits her. And she hired Lucy to join our company as an executive director. I've been with the company for 10 years, but I'm still a regular employee. Everyone was surprised at the difference in treatment between us sisters, but I figured as much. That's because my mother has always favored my sister. Ever since we were kids, she would give beautiful Lucy any clothes, any toys she wanted, and would fuss over her saying, Lucy, you're so cute. This looks so good on you, Lucy. On the other hand, as I wasn't as cute as Lucy, she would give me hand-me-down toys and clothes from my cousins or kids from the neighborhood, saying, this is good enough for you. I didn't really understand why I was being treated this way when I was a child. I just worked hard at studying and helping around the house, trying to gain my mother's attention. But even then, my mother barely paid me any mind, and when I handed her my straight-A report, she would just glance at it. I even considered plastic surgery at one point, thinking that if I wasn't pretty, I wouldn't get any affection. It was my aunt who, upon seeing me in such a state, explained why my mother ignored me so much when I was in high school. I was told my father had died, but in reality, the year Lucy was born, my father ran off with a woman from his workplace. This woman was older than my mother and supposedly less attractive. And that woman, apparently, had an aura similar to mine. My aunt, who happens to be my mother's younger sister, casually commented, your mom is a proud woman. I bet she couldn't bear the thought of losing her husband to an older woman less attractive than herself. As she spoke, there was a distinct air of satisfaction, as though she took delight in my mother's predicament. By the way, my aunt's appearance wasn't particularly remarkable. leaning more towards my side of the family.
Well, she could be a handful, but she was good at her job. Mostly used her charm to get ahead, though, she continued.
My mother took over the family business at the age of 32 when my father left her. She significantly used her striking beauty to attract and retain numerous clients, which significantly boosted the business performance. I think part of the growth was due to the era, with many buildings needing demolition after reaching their lifespan. Therefore, neither my aunt's family nor my cousins could really go against my mother. Recently, the cost of industrial waste disposal and transportation had increased, and the balance between demolition costs and actual expenses had become difficult to maintain. Not only our company, but the entire industry was underperforming. Honestly, it was a struggle to even pay the employees every month. During these challenging times, my younger sister joined the company as an executive director. I wondered how she would manage to pay her salary, but my mother bluntly said, "We'll cut your salary to pay hers. We're family, that's natural, isn't it? Even if you cut my salary, it's still not enough to pay her a salary fitting an executive director." I made a reasonable argument. However, as always, Mom was relentless, saying, "It's your job to figure that out. Just make it work." Tentatively, I suggested, "Shouldn't Lucy start as a regular employee?" My mother gave me a fierce glare and rebuked, "Who do you think you're talking to? This isn't something for someone like you to interfere with." At that time, we were all living under the same roof. Lucy didn't contribute a dime to the household, whereas I put $1,500 into the household every month. Even when Lucy joined our company, she didn't contribute anything to the house. Since I was young, I had been helping around the house for my busy mother, and naturally did the household chores, whereas Lucy did nothing as if it was the norm. "Hey sis, is dinner ready yet?" Lucy would call to ask about dinner when I was working overtime. When I told her to make something for herself because I was working, Lucy said, "What? I don't know what to make. The kitchen is your sanctuary, right? I don't want to get scolded for using it without permission. You got mad at me for that before." She never attempted to cook, using that past incident as an excuse. Lucy never cleaned up after herself and never put things back where they belonged. She was still holding a grudge for the time I scolded her for that. Rather, she was just using that as an excuse to not do anything. I often had to reluctantly come home to prepare dinner, then head back to the office to continue working. My mother usually didn't cook dinner either. Even when I prepared meals, she often just ate out, choosing whatever she felt like eating. However, lately, as my mother frequently went out for business meals with Lucy, I had less need to cook dinner. But the increase in entertainment expenses was causing a new headache. My mother, now 63, was starting to complain more often about various aches and pains, and the effects of drinking heavily. It was during such a time that I was called into the CEO's office and told, "I'm handing the company over to Lucy. You, who are not as attractive, are fired." I could understand the decision to hand over the company to Lucy from my mother's past actions. After all, Lucy was 32. The same age my mother was when she became the CEO. Perhaps my mother thought that if the timing was right, Lucy could use her beauty to get work done just like she did. However, I could not accept being fired due to my appearance. Even if my salary was redirected to Lucy, I didn't see the merit in it. When I consulted my aunt, it seemed that the news of Lucy becoming the CEO had already spread among the employees. However, the news of me being fired was news to my aunt as well. After pondering for a bit, my aunt said, "Well, I don't quite understand, but it seems like Lucy has been saying behind the scenes that she doesn't like the fact that even if she tells everyone she's going to do something at the company, everyone says it's okay because they'll ask Mary for help. Maybe that's part of the reason?" "No, but that's only because everyone stopped asking Lucy because she only does sloppy work, right?" Indeed, Lucy was utterly incompetent at her job. She always missed deadlines, made mistakes on the phone, and made many typographical errors. Even though she had some working experience, she seemed completely unaware of her lack of ability, perhaps because her beauty had always led to men covering up for her. She had never reflected on her actions. My aunt, understanding this point, said, "Well, that's true. But I think she sees you as a nuisance." Continuing on, she lamented, "But I never thought they would fire you. Without you, the company won't be able to function." She sighed, seeming troubled, but didn't go to argue with my mother because she knew she couldn't win. I felt utterly disgusted that I was related by blood to this utterly unreliable aunt. Well, basically, I'm hated by both my mother and my sister, right? I said in a dark voice, to which my aunt, not knowing what to say, responded, well, my sister is indeed terrible. But don't you think you'd be better off working somewhere else given all the skills you have? It's a waste to stay here. She suggested I quit. In her eyes, a faintly kind light of kinship glowed. I stood in the car, bathed in the red glow of the summer twilight, staring blankly at the distant mirage, and felt a sense of release. Maybe it's okay now. And then, I turned to my aunt and said, you're right, with a broad smile on my face. It was the first time since I joined the company that I'd smiled so refreshingly. My aunt, a little puzzled by my smile, returned a somewhat sorrowful smile. And so, while I was busy creating handover documents, sorting out files so that anyone could understand, the end of the month, when I was to resign, came in the blink of an eye. When I went to the CEO's office on time, the sound of birds was no longer audible, and my mother and sister were happily chatting.
That sales guy definitely has a thing for you. Ew, that bald guy, no way.
The two of them were laughing heartily, not noticing me. When I cleared my throat, they finally turned around, and my sister looked at me curiously and said, what's up? If it's about dinner tonight, we don't need it. I'm resigning today. Thank you for everything. Oh, is it today? I forgot. She laughed again. I felt refreshed knowing I wouldn't have to see their faces anymore. I'm also moving out of the house, so please take care of yourselves. My mother mechanically responded, okay, good work. With an emotionless face, I closed the door, and from inside, I heard my sister's voice saying, now we won't have to see that annoying face anymore. In my heart, I muttered, just you watch, and left the company I'd been at for so long. A week later, when I finished the paperwork for a certain school and checked my phone, I noticed a missed call from my mother. In just 2 hours, she had called 14 times. I didn't return the call, as I only had a bad feeling about it, and put my phone on silent, and went home after finishing my other tasks. The missed calls from my mother kept increasing, and when I checked the next morning, there were a total of 80 missed calls. The last call was after 2 a.m. I didn't consider calling her back at all. To me, she was now nothing more than a stranger, and I had no desire whatsoever to hear her voice. I even had fleeting thoughts that if I heard her voice, I might find myself obeying her words. After all, I had been under her control for 35 long years. I ignored her phone calls with all my might, aiming to break free from her spell. I could have blocked her calls, but I thought if something happened, they might serve as evidence of her actions, so I allowed the calls to come through. For a while, I was receiving nearly 100 calls daily. At first, I hated even looking at the incoming calls, but gradually as I got used to it, I felt a sense of satisfaction imagining my mother's face struggling with each unanswered call. I finally realized just how terribly she had treated me. A year passed by in this manner. By then, the calls from my mother had ceased, and I was in a state where I had no clue what was happening with her. Throughout this year, I worked part-time while attending an online school for tax professionals, and successfully passed the exams. I have recently secured a job at a leading tax consultancy firm. I had practical experience to begin with, and having done various tasks at my mother's company gave me the ability to see the bigger picture, which proved to be a great asset in my new company. I felt thankful for the hard work I had put in at the company over the past decade, especially at this moment. The people at my workplace are all wonderful and we work together to get the job done. It's such a huge contrast from when I was left to figure everything out on my own, pushed around by my mother and sister, silently researching on my own, and working alone until the middle of the night. One day, while I was leading a fulfilling life, I had to visit a client near my mother's company. As I passed by her company, I noticed the windows and entrance were conspicuously dirty, and I could see the indoor plants that I had cared for, now withered. And then, on my way back, I ran into my mother who was just coming out of her company. As soon as she saw me, she shouted "Ah!" and came running towards me. Expecting her to berate me, I instinctively covered my face with my bag, but to my surprise, my mother approached me in a sweet, cajoling tone, saying, "Where have you been, Mary?" I felt an uncomfortable shiver run down my spine and instinctively shrank back.
I've called you so many times, you know? Did you change your smartphone?
It seems she hadn't even considered the possibility that I might not want to contact her because I despised her. I couldn't help but wonder about her thought process, given all the things she had done to me. Ignoring my baffled expression, she went on, "Oh, but it's a good thing I saw you. Look at the state of this company. It's dreadful, isn't it? You can start working from tomorrow. I'm not angry, you know."
Huh? So, I forgive you for leaving a year ago. Please start coming to work from tomorrow.
It took me a few seconds to comprehend what my mother had just said. In her mind, was there only an image of a little me, crying and adoring her?
Mom, I'm already working at another company, and I'm happy there.
At my hesitant response, her face contorted into something monstrous, and she bellowed, "What? You're telling me you're working somewhere else while our company is in trouble? I don't give a damn about other companies. You're mine, understand?" causing a scene in the middle of the street.
Wait a minute. You're the one who fired me, remember? What about Lucy? What happened to her?
In response, my mother snorted and dismissively said, "Oh, Lucy. I thought she'd be more useful. But she was caught having affairs with 3 men from our key client. Needless to say, our dealings with them ended in a flash."
If she was careful enough not to get caught, it would have been all right. So, I kept her from the front office and made her do clerical work, but she couldn't even clean properly and was absolutely no good at accounting. Because of her, we couldn't even afford to hire someone else.
After venting her frustrations, my mother turned to me with a grin.
That's why it's your turn, Mary. Ever since you left, the office has been in shambles. I need you to take responsibility.
I had properly created a handover manual before I left and had explained everything to Lucy. Lucy probably hasn't even looked at the handover document I made, and I'm sure my mother hasn't heard anything about it either. No, even if she did hear, she'd either not remember or pretend to have forgotten. In fact, I don't understand why they would fire me and then ask me to take responsibility. This is always how these women act. They take a tough stance, blame others, and let others clean up their mess. It's their usual trick. I bit my lower lip, thought of the kind faces of the people I was currently working with, and swore to myself that this was the real world. I had been living in a crazy world until now, but I wouldn't lose to this pressure anymore.
It was you, the boss, who fired me, isn't it?
My mother seemed a bit startled by the change in my tone.
And the reason you fired me was because I'm ugly, right?
Before I knew it, a crowd had gathered around us, apparently intrigued by our argument. While mindful of the eyes around her, my mother stuttered, "Did I say something like that? Are you sure you didn't mishear?"
"No, I heard it very clearly. You're going to hand over the company to my beautiful sister and fire me, the ugly one. I didn't understand what you meant. I've been working my butt off at the company for 10 years, but you suddenly decided to hand over the company to my sister who barely does any work after just 2 years. I question your judgment."
As I explained this clearly, the crowd began to stir.
Really? Can that happen? That's awful, isn't it? Is she her own mother? Are they two related by blood?
Some people even started filming us. I was so angry I didn't care about that. As my mother started sweating and turning pale under the collective glares of blame from around her, she started to panic.
"Mary, you're misunderstanding. Let's go inside for now." Misunderstanding? What am I misunderstanding? If you didn't say such a thing, shouldn't you be able to clearly say it wasn't like that?
When my mother fell silent, the people around us started to say, "Oh, she's silent. So it's true. That's unbelievable." Then, something seemed to snap in my mother. She started shouting, "Shut up. It's all your fault for being ugly and gloomy.
Ugly people should know their place and obediently do what beautiful people say. That's all you're good for."
People around us were taken aback by her outrageous behavior and began to upload their videos quickly. "The ugly woman obeys the beautiful woman." The thumbnail headlines were like that. The video went viral to my mother's clients, and she was soon told to cease all transactions with all companies. It seems that in the year after I left the company, they were engaged in a lot of shady activities, like fraudulent registration and tampering with the accounting books. So, when the video spread, everyone seemed happy to distance themselves. Naturally, the company went bankrupt, and my mother and sister, who had lost their source of income, once came to my apartment, but of course I didn't open the door. In the end, they moved to a 45-year-old apartment with no bath, living in fear of their creditors, working part-time. Because my sister always tried to take it easy by flirting with the male employees due to her beauty, she was disliked by her fellow part-timers and had to change her part-time job frequently. As for my mom, everyone knew about the video that had spread on the internet, and she was being distanced by her part-time work colleagues. It seems she's just silently working by herself. Meanwhile, I found a boyfriend at my new workplace. He's not handsome, but he told me he likes me because I work very seriously and sincerely. We're planning to get married soon. I'm spending my days feeling truly glad that I've been diligent all this time.